Pender. I have the great honor of being the national president of the Ancient Order of Hibernians. Today, we continue to bring with you some of the latest news coming out of Ireland regarding a legacy. Just this week, there was a major ruling regarding the Springhill-Westrock Massacre, and today we're gathering to discuss that. It is my great honor at this point to turn it over to our leading voice on legacy, our Freedom for All Ireland chairman, Martin Galvin. Martin?
Thank you, Sean. July 9th, 1972, nearly 54 years ago, there had been a ceasefire in the north of Ireland. A delegation of Republicans, a six-member delegation, had actually been flown to England to negotiate about they had had a truce about a permanent resolution of the conflict at that point. Sometime on July 9th in Lenadoon, a neighborhood of Belfast, that ceasefire broke down over an issue of housing. Later that night, British snipers began to open fire. A young man named John Dougal was killed, shot in the back as he ran away, shot without warning. Two other young men, two other teenagers, were shot also and wounded. A Catholic priest, Father Fitzpatrick, came and went to aid them and went to the home of Patrick Butler to get assistance. 5 people would be killed altogether, including a teenage girl, Margaret Gargan, in what would become known as the Springhill-Westrock Massacre. But the killings in less than an hour that night were not the end of it. The cover-up began almost immediately, and the family members were harassed and had to begin a 54-year fight for justice. Last week, on April 30th, they finally got vindication and exoneration for their loved ones with an inquest verdict that said the truth that these families knew all along, that their families members were innocent, their loved ones were shot down without warning by British troopers. That verdict comes amidst calls for special protections for British troopers such as those who shot down these 4 individuals. And today we've also had another court decision in which a London Supreme Court has overturned the decision of Belfast High Court judges about the legacy acts that the British are proposing, about the suitability of the ICRIR, the British device created by the Tories, which most families and many families in the north of Ireland will not go to because it offers them no hope for justice. Today, we're going to hear from 2 of the victims' relatives. We're going to go first to Jackie Butler, the daughter of Patrick Butler, one of 6 children who Father Fitzpatrick came to for help after the young man John Dougal was shot and Martin Dudley and Brian Pettigrew were injured. We're going to hear what happened, why the priest came to them, what happened when their father went out of the door, and what happened to their family in the years since in their 54 fight for justice. We'll then go to Harry Gargan, whose sister was just coming back from doing an errand, and she too was killed. We're going to talk about the circumstances of that, what his family had to face, their 54-year fight for justice, how they have just simply asked for and not gotten an apology. We're going to hear about the repercussions of that, or the position of the Irish government, from Consul General Angley, and we're then going to go to John Finucane, a civil rights lawyer, a member of parliament elected by the Sinn Féin party, but somebody whose family, as much as any others, have been emblematic of the courageous campaigns against injustice as they continue to campaign about truth for their own father, Patrick Finucane, the civil rights lawyer, and he's going to talk about the implications of special protections for British troopers, such as those who were involved in the Springhill-Westrock Massacre. We're going to first go to Jacqueline Butler, the daughter of Patrick Butler. Jacqueline, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me here today.
All right, Jacqueline, I've set the scene. Late that night, sometime around 9:30, British snipers opened fire. They killed the young man, John Dougal, 16, shot him in the back without warning, as the coroner has ruled. They shot 2 other young teenagers, Martin Dudley and Brian Pettigrew. They were lying injured. A priest, Father Noel Fitzpatrick, was called upon to give last rites to the dying, or hopefully to minister to those who were wounded. And he came to your door that of your father, Patrick Butler, for help. Why did he come to your door? Why? What happened when they left the house?
Well, Paul Fitzpatrick came to our door because my father was quite involved in Corpus Christi Chapel. He helped out, and my father was quite religious, so he was well known to the priests and the nuns and around the district because he did a lot for the community. So he was directed towards my daddy's house to help him get the injured.
Okay. And what happened when they left your father's house?
Well, they went down a back way trying to get to the injured without being shot because there was anybody that moved that night were being shot at. And as they turned the corner to go, Father Fitzpatrick waving a white flag, the two of them popped around the corner and the two of them were shot with the same bullet.
Okay, now Father Fitzpatrick, was he dressed as a priest as well as waving a white handkerchief or flag, something like that scene, the iconic scene from Bloody Sunday with Father Daly?
Yes, he was dressed in his priest and with a long black cloak as well, so it was quite visible that he was a priest.
Okay, all right. So he was shot. Your father was shot with the same bullet. They were killed with the same bullet. It turned out by the same person, same sniper who killed John Dougal, and then someone else, David McCafferty. What happened with him?
David McCafferty went to pull the priest's body in, and as he went to put his arms underneath the priest, he was shot as well.
Okay, and he also was killed, and this was all by the same trooper. Uh, Killed John Dougal, killed your father, killed Noel Fitzpatrick, killed David McCafferty, 15, for trying to help a wounded priest or an injured priest and help your father. All right, now, why is it that you had to wait 54 years for justice, to have this explained, to get the truth out that your father, that the priest, that the other two individuals were not, there was no justification for shooting them by those British snipers?
Well, the next morning it was reported that it was five gunmen all dressed in black. They tried to cover it up because they didn't want it to be known that they killed a priest, a father of six, a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 13-year-old young schoolgirl. So they, as they did in the past, they started their propaganda that it was five gunmen that were shot that night. And even the priest says that he was trying to retrieve a firearm and that he was bending down, which the expert witness says he couldn't have been bending down. He had popped his head round, and him and my daddy, one was looking one way and the other was looking the other way, and the two of them was killed with the same bullet.
And in addition, there were no firearms or anything like that, bullets, anything recovered, which would have indicated that there was a firearm, that anyone was armed, that there were bullets fired at the snipers, anything like that, any evidence that would have backed up that story. Is that
No,
correct?
no, there was none on their hands. All the forensics there was nothing to show that any of them handled a firearm.
And yet the first inquest in 1973, that just rubber stamped and just the killings. How was that possible?
Yeah, it was behind a screen and somebody just read out a statement of the soldiers and it was just left as an open verdict then.
Okay, meaning they couldn't establish, no one knew what happened. Is
Yeah.
that
My mummy went there thinking that she was going to get answers and she came away totally heartbroken because she just thought that my daddy, what it says, my daddy was an innocent man, and it was just left that it was an open verdict and they couldn't make a decision.
okay? Now, in addition to the terrible impact that that must have had, you're one of six children, your mother who suddenly injured, left without a husband. That wasn't the end of it. The cover up What did the British do after that that you feel is vindictive, just as part of this whole cover-up?
Well, because my daddy was known to be a gunman, we were targeted by the army maybe 3 times a week. Every time a new regiment came in, our house was trashed. They spit on my daddy's photo and spit on Father Fitzpatrick's photo that also hung on our wall. We were trailed out of bed in the middle of the night. We were set in a freezing cold, all lined up in our nightwear, and why we'd watch the British Army destroying our home maybe 3 times a week,
How long did that last?
right up until 1988.
All right, so that would have been 16 years
Yeah,
after your father was killed.
yes.
In 2014, your family began to campaign earlier. Finally, in 2014, you got an inquest ordered. Why is it that it took to 2026 to get an inquest verdict and to have the decision that you were always entitled to?
We just we got good news and it was followed by bad news all the time. It was just like they wanted to block us getting a new inquiry. And then COVID came along as well. So it took until um 2 years ago to actually get into court. And as soon as we got the new inquest, the legacy bill was announced as well. So it was like they were trying to stop us getting the truth and the truth being out there.
All right, that's the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Bill, which said that if you didn't complete the inquest by a certain date, a guillotine date, it's sometimes called, the inquest would be terminated. You wouldn't get any findings. It would go to the ICRIR, that commission that many people, yourself and others, don't trust, don't have any faith in. I think the coroner had to go to extraordinary efforts to complete the inquest. The British were trying to stall it, so you'd be marked out of court without findings. Is that correct?
Yes, we were so thankful that the coroner stayed late at night and opened the court on a Saturday, which never happens. And he says that he would stay to midnight that night because the MOD kept trying to stall it. And he says that he would open until they got their act together. And then all of a sudden, what they were trying to withhold the kind of way brought to the table because they knew that the coroner was going to close it one way or the other.
All right, that's the Ministry of Defense. That's the British Ministry of Defense, which is not turning over discovery, not complying with court orders, doing anything they could to stall it so you'd never get the verdict. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Okay.
all the evidence went missing, like the cipher soldiers' names and all. In our case, there was very little evidence put forward by the MOD. Everything suddenly disappeared. So we don't know. We'll never know who the soldiers' names is because the cipher list, the British government says that everything went missing, which they're known to keep facts that goes back centuries. But in our case, it suddenly went missing.
All right, so they're saying they didn't have any records, didn't have any ciphers, couldn't tell who the shooter was. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, what happened when there were British soldiers who testified, who were supplied by the British as to be people who were on duty at that location and time? What did they testify to in the inquest court?
A lot of them denied all knowledge that they were in Corey's timber yard until they were proved that they were in there. And one that openly lied and says he was in he was in our place that day, was found lied, and he laughed and held his hands up and says, "Oh, you got me, I must have been there." So they openly flaunted it. They didn't care because they knew that nothing would happen to them.
All right. What's your reaction to the verdict of the coroner and the findings at last that your father was just killed for trying to help a priest go to the aid of a dead youth and wounded?
We're delighted because that's all we ever wanted. We just wanted his good name restored, that he was an innocent man going to help people that night. He wasn't a gunman. He was never a gunman. He was never involved in anything like that. He was a good, hardworking man who loved the community and loved the chapel and loved his family. And that's what was proved that day.
All right. And what have you asked for now as a result of the verdict?
Well, we're happy enough. We never, as a family, that's all we really wanted. We didn't want prosecution or anything. So we're quite happy with the verdict that we got.
Okay. All right. Next, we're going to go to Harry Gargan. Harry, and your sister, 13, this was separate from and apart from the first four people who were killed. Could you tell us the circumstances which led to her being shot?
Hello, Martin. Thank you for your support, and both of our families, thank you for all the support you've given us over the years. Firstly, myself and Margaret was 13, I was 12, and our father was the secretary of the local tenants association. There was bingo on in the local community centre that night, so me and Margaret went with my father to the bingo. So during the bingo, the first half of the bingo would have ended, and my father came and said to me, Harry, would you go and check on your brothers and sisters? And I said, no, Dad, I can't do it. I have to do the second half of the bingo. So Margaret said, I'll go. So when this was happening, there was nothing happening in our area. It was all quiet. Sometimes during this inquest, they actually tried to say there was a gun battle going on. But there were, at that time, about 9:15, there was nothing actually happening in our area. It was quiet. So Margaret left the community centre with her friend Marie. And our house is only, about 100 yards from the community centre. As her Marie approached, she seen Marie's sister and two other girls outside their door. So they stood to talk. And while they were standing there chatting, all of a sudden they heard one shot and Margaret fell. The next moment they run up their path screaming, and their daddy came out and he says, Margaret's lying down there, Margaret's lying down there. And they were shouting, Mark, get up, get up. They thought she was that known, but Margaret was lying on the ground, motionless. So the next thing that happened was people tried to get her in. And while the people were trying to get her into that house, the army kept firing and firing and firing. So they couldn't get her into the house. So eventually a fellow called Dennis Devaney managed to get over and got her into the house.
I just want to be clear. People were trying to go to her assistance and British troopers were firing.
The army were still shooting from Corrie's Timber Yard. The bullets were bouncing off the ground beside Margaret's body. So my father and I were in the community centre. We didn't know this was going on. You couldn't hear any shooting in the community centre. And all of a sudden a man burst in and shouted, Margaret Gargan's been shot. So my father grabbed me by the hand and went out the back way of the community centre and in the neighbour's house, a woman's house, and someone told her where Margaret was. So we had to crawl on our hands and knees. The gunfire was still coming from Corrie's Timber Yard. We had to crawl on our hands and knees till we got to the neighbour's house. And we got to the neighbour's house. By the end, it got her in. That was about half an hour after she'd been shot. And she was lying on a corrugated iron sheet with a bullet wound to the side of her face.
Right. How did the British justify killing your sister, your 13-year-old sister, as she stood on the pavework near her house with talking to friends?
So, as Jacqueline said, the main thing was the following year at the inquest. At the inquest to Margaret, my mother and father may have been a bit naive. They thought they were going to hear somebody say, Mr. and Mrs. Gargan, we're sorry for killing your daughter, something like that. But when they got there, all they heard was Soldier E's statement, and what he said identified a 20-year-old gunman outside 8 Westrock Gardens. He was going to shoot him, but decided not to. And then he comes back and he says, then I spotted the gunman again. The only people outside Westrock Gardens was 4 teenage girls. And then he shot her. That's what my mother and father had to listen to in that inquest. And my mother was never the same after that.
And the coroner ruled one of the things that he was clear about was that there was no disturbance, gunfire, anything like that going on at the time that your sister was killed, that was totally fabricated. Is that?
Yes, the shooting started around the corner because Margaret was shot away from the rest of them. Where the other ones were shot was probably about 100 yards from where Margaret was. So initially they fired on the car. That's how it began.
Okay. All right. You talked about your mother and father, the impact of them going to the 1973 inquest. Your family has been campaigning for an inquest. You got one in 2014. Were the British troopers who ever shot Margaret identified?
None of that's what came out in the inquest. That all the information about the names of the soldiers, A to G, they were the safest of the soldiers fired. It all gone. I think all the Royal Mounted, the police, the army's policemen, they had lost all their records. There was no records kept of the guns, no records kept of the amount of bullets they used. This is all against their procedures. There was none of this done, and it had all disappeared.
Okay, so the British are arguing they need special protection for these former troopers, but it seems like something is going on if all of these records disappear and there's no way of identifying them so many years later. Would that be a fair statement?
That is fair, but the thing is, if they want to find them, they could find them. Everyone knows that. But actually, a soldier from a different platoon in the same regiment actually said that in the inquest. He said, if things hadn't been done sooner, we wouldn't be in this court now. So he knew there was something going on there and then, back in the day in 72.
Okay. You've been fighting for justice for so many years. You lost a number of family members who were not alive to hear the verdict. Who would that be?
Well, and when the judge finished the inquest 2 years ago, Margaret's twin sister Bernadette, my brother Martin, and my youngest sister Mary, had passed before he came back with the findings. So it was very hard on us, very traditional, that none of them were there to hear the findings of the judge. That's been the hardest thing.
Now, the Ballymurphy families, after that inquest verdict was issued, an apology was issued by the British government. You have asked simply for an apology by the British government. You said you're not interested in prosecutions. What's the response been?
We've heard nothing yet. It's not about prosecution, is a legal thing. If someone killed someone, it's up to the government or the law to prosecute them. I personally don't want them, but in my mind, it's up to the government, the establishment, to prosecute people that break the rules and kill people. But as for, I don't think it's ever going to happen, like anyway. But we're happy enough to get an inquest. The inquest was always the goal, because I think the inquest is a very important thing, and that's why the British government want read them, because they're actually telling the story of what happens to people, and they don't want that happening.
Well, you were fortunate to be able to finish and get these results. The British Northern Ireland Troubles Reconciliation and Legacy and Reconciliation Act would cut off inquests for many other people. So you were fortunate to get this, and you were fortunate to have a coroner who would go to heroic efforts opening the court on the weekends and staying open till midnight just to get you the result. What was it like finally to get that result in court?
To me, it was a wee bit mixed. I'm happy, because that's all my mother and father really wanted. They wanted to hear that their daughter was actually murdered. And even though they don't say that, that is what it is. It is murder. And we're losing our family members and still can't really get over that. But I'm really happy that we've finally got the truth. Truth is very important, more than anything.
All right. And you're fortunate to be able to get an inquest when so many other families who are just behind you, it seems like they will not get an inquest or anything like the results that you got. And just one thing that's important, one of the things about an inquest, you were represented by solicitors, legal counsel. They were able to question any witnesses who came into court. They were able to get discovery on your behalf and look at it, prepare the case, go over it with you. How important that right to have your own lawyers representing you, how important was that to you and to the other families in this proceeding?
I think that's the most important thing. It's the most important thing to have that, because for that's the only way you're ever going to get the truth, once you're able to get everything to do with discovery.
Okay, and that's Patrick Murray was, I believe, your representative. Is that right?
Yes, Paddy was and he was unbelievable. The things he went to make sure our inquest got heard.
And he also did a tremendous job in terms of the Ballymurphy as well.
Yeah.
Okay, next we're going to go to get the Irish government perspective. We're going to get that from Consul General Gerald Angley. Consul General, what is the position? You've heard what happened at the inquest. I know the government has taken position on it. The foreign minister commented. What is the Irish government's position in relation to the findings of this inquest?
Look, thank you, Martin. Thank you and Sean and the AOH for facilitating this conversation and a great turnout as well. Just showing the level of interest there is here in the United States and in the New York area where we meet ourselves. The work you do kind of really backs up the work we do as a government, and we value your contacts. But look, it's very it's amazing is perhaps not the right word, but to listen to Jacqueline and to Harry, tell the human stories of what happened there all those years ago. The fact to have to wait 54 years is really, really extraordinary to get some truth or some kind of closure, as the Americans sometimes say. But I think it just proves why we need a victim-centered approach for legacy, and why this particular inquest just squeaked through based on the Legacy Act could have blocked it, and it is blocking other ones. But this is really an extraordinary case, and it's funny. I was thinking the very same question as you, Martin, regarding Father Daly and that image from Bloody Sunday, and simply shooting somebody who's trying to do the work Father Daly was doing in Derry just shortly, some months beforehand. It's extraordinary. But look, I think our focus, obviously, this is a really important coroner's report. What the coroner does with the report, next steps, why I'm not sure whether that's clear yet. But we're focused, I suppose, as a government on delivering the new legacy framework that was agreed with the British government, because with the 1,000 or 1,200 unsolved cases, with people, with victims' families getting older and waiting all this time for some kind of justice or information, and after all the frustrations with the Stormont House Agreement and Eames Bradley and various other things, that we're really just focused on getting this new legacy structure, imperfect or compromised though it is, into place. So we're I think with the elections in Britain that took place yesterday now behind the government, I know it didn't go well for them, but nonetheless, that focus can come back to doing things and legislating. So I think what we understand is that the bill going through Parliament in Westminster, and I see John's come on screen there, is scheduled for the next session, which starts this week. And we're hearing things about May and June as the kind of timeline for the bill. And as you know as well, there's already more than 100 amendments on it, many in the kind of veteran space, which is familiar territory for all of us. So I think as a government, we are doing a number of things. I mean, it's daily, regular contact at political and official level with British counterparts to kind of ensure that the track is stayed on for what's in the framework, and that contact is ongoing. The Taoiseach and Taoiseach were in Belfast in the last couple of days, as various as this extremely important coroner's report came through, and indeed the Dillon judgment as well. Very active on this. We'll watch those amendments and the handling of them as they go through. The other part of it is, obviously the legacy framework involves commitments by the Irish government in our jurisdiction as well, and that is all very, very well advanced. Whether it's in regards to OMA, whether it's in regards to various legal legislative things that are required to do our side of the deal as well. So we're acting in good faith there. And just to stress, I know this is important to people, that the interstate case remains live. There is no change there, and I think the Taoiseach confirmed that in Belfast. It is that case is still there.
I will tell you, I'm just back with a 43-member delegation. I know Sean Penders, who's there in Ireland, heard the same thing. And we meet with victims groups. In fact, we had met with the group, the victims here, Harry and Jacqueline, in Belfast. But as we travel over, people talk about how important the interstate case is, that the Irish government bringing a case on their behalf, having that leverage, the symbolism of that, the possible use of that as leverage, that is very important. It's gratifying to them. They feel that that case shows that the Irish government is with them. And I can't tell you how many times I heard about how much that is appreciated. And everybody's hopeful, as you say, when the new legacy legislation comes forward, that it won't be necessary to have a case. But I will tell you, with my 50 years of experience of monitoring the British government, I'm not expecting that to happen. I would not be at all surprised if it becomes necessary to go forward with the case to get the British government to comply with the European law, the Convention on Human Rights, etc. But that's waits to be seen. All right, you've told us again you're in touch. I know officers in Dublin, the ministers, etc., are in touch with the British on this. So, do you have any kind of an agreement on special protections? I know I've studied. There's more than 100 amendments. There's one that give immunity to any servant of the crown. I mean, that seems like Freddie Scappaticci, who was a British, others, I mean, anybody who wore the British uniform, person who killed Jacqueline's father and the priest, all of them would be protected. What's the position of the Irish government on that?
I suppose I probably don't know the individual amendment, but it sounds familiar. It sounds familiar over the years. I was in London at our embassy, focusing on these issues about 6, 7 years ago. And these sort of proposals were certainly coming through at the time. So, I mean, it's just we have a fundamental position that all those accused of any crime, if it gets to that point, are treated equally, and all witnesses are treated equally as well. This is at the core of compliance with the Convention on Human Rights. So that's our test there. So let's see how we go with these. But it's not surprising those amendments are there. Not at all.
Okay. I just want to say how positive I find we deal with groups like Mark Thompson, Relatives for Justice, and many of the other groups who deal with victims, and they talk about the ongoing communication they've had with the Irish government, and they've stated the same position as you. I can't tell you how positive that is and how grateful people are that the Irish government is taking the strong position on legacy that you've articulated again. All right, next we're going to go to John Finucane, and John is on as somebody who's a member of Parliament from Belfast, is somebody who's on as a solicitor to give us expertise, and he's on as somebody who's a member of one of the families who has launched a campaign I'll call as heroic to get justice for their own family member, Pat Finucane, the civil rights lawyer. Somebody's a friend of mine, represented me, and was killed at a time when collusion, the British government denied that Her Majesty's government would ever consort with criminals to get involved with collusion to kill a civil rights lawyer. And we know how different that is. And John's waiting also for the Finucane family is waiting also for the public inquiry that they've been given into the murder of their father in February of 1989. John, what is your reaction to the inquest verdict that we've just talked about?
Well, thanks, Martin. And it's very timely that we have this webinar today. It's been a very busy week. And in fact, a busy couple of weeks when we're focusing on legacy. I have prepared some remarks that I was going to read from, if that's okay. And then if there's anything that I've missed, I'm happy to go back and either clarify or expand on some points if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And again, thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you this evening and for your continued solidarity with families and communities at home here who continue to campaign.
I just want to say your mother particularly is an example to families like the Springhill-Westrock Massacre families, like Ballymurphy, all of the others. The courage that she and your whole family showed, it's an example for everybody. I wanted to get that in before you read your statement.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I think that a victory or an advancement for one family I think all families feel that. So whilst at times people may have looked at my mother, I think this week we're looking to the likes of Jacqueline and Harry and their families and everybody else who was affected by Springhill. But that's very kind, Martin. Thank you. As I said, this week has brought legacy issues sharply into public focus. As we've heard days ago, we got the findings of the Springhill inquest relating to the killings of 5 people in West Belfast in July 72, as we've heard, among them a priest who was waving a white cloth whilst trying to help the wounded. After more than 50 years, the coroner found that those victims were entirely innocent and that the use of force by the British Army was not justified. For those families, those findings were deeply significant. No legal ruling can undo decades of grief, but it matters profoundly when the truth is finally acknowledged officially and publicly. And I think Springhill also stands as a reminder of something very important in the wider legacy debate, that families were right to persist. For many years, these families were dismissed, disbelieved, forced through exhausting legal battles simply to establish basic facts. Yet despite all of that, they continued. That brings me to Thursday's Supreme Court judgment in London in the Dillon case concerning the British government's Legacy Act and the ICRIR, now proposed to be renamed the Legacy Commission. There will be some who attempt to portray that judgment as a complete vindication of the British government's approach to legacy. However, I do not believe that is an accurate reading of what the court actually said. First and foremost, my thoughts remain with those families who took the case, and also many families who will be deeply disappointed by the judgment. These are families who have also spent decades fighting for truth, accountability, and proper disclosure surrounding the deaths of their loved ones. And it's important to understand what the court was actually deciding. This was a prospective challenge to the structures established by the British government. The court was not ruling that every future investigation carried out by the ICRIR will comply with human rights standards. Rather, the court applied a very high legal threshold and held that families had not demonstrated at this stage that the system would fail in all or almost all cases. That is materially different proposition from declaring these structures fully vindicated or beyond challenge. Indeed, key findings that aspects of the legislation remain incompatible with human rights protections still stand from our earlier courts, and the British government itself has already abandoned the immunity provisions because they were morally wrong, lacked public confidence, and repeatedly failed legal scrutiny. Importantly too, the Supreme Court rejected arguments advanced on behalf of British military veterans seeking what they described as a, quote, reconciliation exception, end quote, from accountability obligations under human rights law. The court made clear that no such exemption presently existed in law. But beyond the legal arguments, what remains most striking to me is the continuing and profound crisis of confidence around legacy structures. And that concern is not just confined to me or indeed to Sinn Féin. It's shared by many victims and survivors, by many human rights organisations, by NGOs working directly with families. And indeed, very recently in Westminster, I spoke with and heard from the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Truth, Justice and Reparation, who shared those concerns. We have also seen a review commissioned by the British government itself, identifying concerns around governance and culture within the ICRIR at senior levels. So when families express deep unease about these mechanisms, those concerns are not abstract or ideological, they are grounded in very real experience. I also remain deeply concerned by the broader direction of travel from the British government. The legislation is now being delayed until the autumn, yet many victims and survivors do not see that additional time being used to strengthen their rights or enhance protections for families. Instead, they see continuing political focus on how further reassurances and protections can be provided to British military veterans, and that is deeply troubling. There cannot be a one-sided approach to legacy for state actors and another for everybody else. Any credible process must apply equally to all, must be genuinely independent, must be human rights compliant, and must command the confidence of victims and survivors themselves. At this moment in time, many families clearly do not believe that threshold has been met. But despite all of the frustration, all of the delay, and all of the legal and political obstacles placed before them, families continue to persist. And as Springhill reminded us this week, persistence matters. Truth matters, accountability matters, and no government, no institution, and no court judgment can remove the determination of families to continue seeking both truth and justice.
Right. John, you're talking about special protections for veterans. We just heard one British trooper murdered John Dougal, murdered Father Noel Fitzpatrick, murdered Patrick Butler, murdered David McCafferty, the same trooper, and yet British government says they can't identify him. which just seems to me to be totally implausible. Hasn't there always been special protections under the law to justify British troopers? And are they just trying to codify that, what they've been doing, without resort to legislation or without resort to admitting it? Are they just trying to add things that'll just do the same thing, which has always been British practice, while you don't see the trooper who killed those 4 individuals coming to a courtroom and being identified?
Well, practically in the legacy process in recent times, we all know that over the course of our conflict here, there was effectively a de facto immunity for state actors, whether they were in uniform or not, regarding their actions that led to many, many deaths here. But certainly in recent times, there has been a different approach. Those who are accused of historic Republican or Loyalist acts tend to be arrested and have to go through a court system to secure bail and things like that. In the criminal context, that has never applied to my knowledge when it comes to those few British soldiers that have found themselves before the criminal courts. So there actually has been a different approach, but not one that has been to the detriment of British soldiers. One point that was very forcefully made by Bernard Duhame, the United Nations Special Rapporteur I cited, was that there is a lot of what he called fake news around the legacy process. The facts that emanate from the PSNI and our Public Prosecution Service will show that the narrative that is often discussed quite vocally and vociferously, and I would say also very obnoxiously in Westminster at times, is not supported by the actual raw data when we look at this. The joint framework is something that was welcomed, broadly speaking, with the British and Irish government. It returned to a dual approach to legacy, which can only be welcomed after the disastrous solo run of the Tory government. However, it's worth remembering that I think less than 24 hours after the joint framework was announced, the British government not only set out special protections for their veterans, but they also set out special provisions in effectively denying anybody who was interned from taking civil actions. They dressed that up around a bogeyman of Gerry Adams, but as we know, internment affected hundreds and hundreds of people, some as young as 14 or 15, I believe. So I think there was already an act of bad faith that was introduced from the outset. But that said, the time between now and after the King's speech, where the government's amendments will take shape and be published, I met along with party colleagues the Taoiseach this week, and we reiterated to the Irish government that it is very important that they remain vigilant at this time, that the British government are not sidetracked by perhaps domestic political issues which are taking shape after the elections the election results that we've seen over the last 24 hours. But there are serious obligations that they need to live up to. Everybody, I think, is on the same page that this is possibly the last chance to get this right, certainly for those who matter. And without sounding crude, by that I mean a lot of people are getting older and getting on, and this could be the last chance that they have to actually see some form of information and truth and justice. And therefore, when the British government recognise the obligations that they have, I would say that they should not be doing the bare minimum that they can get away with. They should be making credible attempts to actually give families what it is that they need. So that's the position that everybody finds themselves in at the minute. There are amendments that you would expect to see coming from Reform, from the Conservatives, from that type of the political class, but the actual government's amendments, we will await to see exactly what shape and direction they will go. But the rhetoric, without overstating it, concerns me at this stage, and that direction of travel. But we will wait and see. And as always, because we're well used to this, no more than yourself, Martin, over decades, we will remain vigilant and on top of what it is the British government intend to do.
Okay, before I let you go, I'd like you to just tell us where the public inquiry into the death of your father that has been promised some time back, where that is now.
So it was announced in September 24. We had a chair announced around May, June last year. We will have an opening hearing, a formal opening hearing, I would imagine, at some stage in the next 2 months. The date hasn't been confirmed as yet, but I think that should be announced publicly quite soon. We are not in the evidence gathering stage as yet. That will take some time. It has been slow. I don't say that necessarily in an accusatory sense, but we want to get this right. We don't want to do it quick, to use the old cliche. So we expect there will be an opening hearing quite soon. And then there will be some hearings this year, but I think with regards getting into the nuts and bolts of the evidence of the disclosure issues and the meat of this inquiry, I think you're probably talking 2027 onwards. But as ever, we will be updating the likes of yourselves and our supporters and friends North American side, because as Jacqueline and Harry both touched on as well, the support that we have been lucky to receive domestically, but importantly internationally, has been of huge strength and comfort to my mum and everybody in our family. We wouldn't have been able to advance without that support, and also that, you know, Gerald's here. Sorry, it would be wrong not to acknowledge the very strong Irish government support that we've enjoyed and benefited from over the years. So we are hopefully getting stuck into the work of the inquiry quite soon.
Okay. Before we will go back to everybody just for a minute or two. I just want to make a statement. I've said to people on a personal basis, there are a lot of lawyers, the Brehon Law Society in particular, others used to go and observe proceedings. This would be an important time, I think, when your family's inquest comes up, when Pat's inquest come up. He was so integral, came over so many times to myself, others, the Brehon Law Society and others. It might be something to consider, having attorneys go over at appropriate times and observe the proceedings, have the British government aware, or have the inquiry aware that there are American legal observers there for this civil rights lawyer who gave his life really because he was fighting so hard for civil rights of others, including people like Sean Mackin and Gabe McGahey out here. Okay, we're going to go back, give everybody a minute or so just to final words. If you want to add anything, Jacqueline, we're going to go to you first.
I just want to thank everybody so much for your support as family members. It really makes a difference to us. And I just want to say thank you for your continued support. That we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and thank you and all of the families for the courage, the dedication. Sean Pentner always says, we only have the truth. You have it. You won because you're maintained and persisted with that. And I'll tell you, you're an inspiration to everything that happens in the United States with the AOH and other groups. Next, Harry.
Hello, Martin. I think it's now important to celebrate the bravery and courage of Father Fitzpatrick, Patrick Butler, David McCafferty, and John Dougal. They were going to the aid of their fellow neighbours and friends, and I think it's time now to recognise how brave and selfless they were in their acts that night.
Okay, and you have made a public call for an apology. I think one of the things that we can do in the Ancient Order of Hibernians and Irish America and other groups is echo your call for an apology. It's time for the British government at least to apologize after so many years, not just for the murder, but for the cover-up, the vindication, the harassment of your families, and what they put you through just to get a measure of justice, trying to delay it until the inquest ended. Okay, next, Consul General Gerald Angley.
Thanks, Martin. And it's very important to listen today, to listen to Harry and Jacqueline, but also John, and it's great to see. Also, I mean, sadly, also many decades later, some progress in relation to your dad there, and we'll keep a close eye on that. But just to say, just again, we are laser focused on getting this framework made into law and reality and in practice, so that much more can be achieved, and say goodbye to that legacy act that's currently in place. Thanks.
Okay, I appreciate you being here. As I said, after we do webinars like this, I always get calls and people say, I didn't know the Irish government was so involved on the issue or taking a positive stand. So it was good to have you on just so you can explain what is being done. And I know victims groups, victims in the North really appreciate that. Okay, next, back to you, John Finucane.
Look, I certainly used up more than my allotted time, I'm sure, Martin. So I think I've said everything that I wanted to say, but it is really important, platforms like this today and people being informed as to what exactly the up-to-date position is and using their voice in America to make sure that it's as relevant over there as it is here. So again, thank you to yourself and Sean and the AOH for the platform today and the ability and opportunity to talk to you. So thanks again.
Okay, in a minute, I know we have a video from Sean, and we'll give him a chance just if he wants to say anything. Uh, Before we do that, I just want to thank Harry, Jacqueline, John, your family, all of the victims. You are all an inspiration to us in the United States. We are able to do things. We have interest across the country. We have support for you in Congress. We raise money for some of the groups like Relatives for Justice who campaign. And we can do that, and we can accomplish that, and we can have programs like this, and people are so interested because of the courage, the dedication all of you have shown. We want to stand behind you. We are honored to stand behind you, as I told the family of Sean Brown, told so many families. We are honored to stand behind you. You're an inspiration to us. Stand, communicate with us, because we will do everything we can because of your inspiration to see that your families get justice, just as we have since 1836. The AOH been involved in supporting all those who seek a united Ireland. All right, we're going to finish up. I don't know if Sean wants to say something. I know he has a video. We're actually look like we're going to pull this in within an hour, which we always say we're going to do and never happens. But before I do that, I want to thank everybody. Harry, Jacqueline, Consul General Gerald Angley, and John, for your contributions, which mean so much. The video will be up on YouTube, and the usual practice is we have a certain number of people watch it live, and then over the next few days, we'll get hundreds of people watching it, and they'll go around, it'll be covered in the Irish American media, and it'll have an important impact, and it's a vital part of all that we're able to accomplish. And we're able to accomplish these things because of the inspiration that you provide. All right, Sean, do you want to say anything or just rely on the video?
Thank you, Martin. I'll take it. I want to commend you for your passion and your great work on putting this together. Just a couple of days ago, I met Harry outside of Relatives for Justice in West Belfast, and I put out my hand and I was about to say congratulations, but I caught myself, and I even told Harry as much. It's difficult to say congratulations, yes, for finally getting the truth and some justice, but it's hard that anybody had to wait over 4 years to get this. But sadly, it's a story we've heard way too often. I want to echo my thanks and to Harry and Jacqueline and to Gerald, Consul General Angley. I have been in Ireland. I've made visits across all parties and all different levels of government, and I've continually talked about the legacy and the importance of the Irish government. And it's one thing I think we're all in lockstep. And of course, to John Finucane and the valiant fight that you and your mom and your entire family have put up. It continues to inspire us, and we hope for one day for justice with that. On Thursday after. I had the opportunity to take a walk to the Memorial Garden. And I'd just like to say, we're honored to stand with the families of Spring Hill today. Your decades of courage and perseverance and the truth have been an inspiration to Irish Americans across all 50 states. We do not come here as observers. We come as people who share your conviction that what happened here demands truth, and that truth demands accountability. The inquest was not a political outcome. It was a judicial reckoning. A court of law concluded that soldiers lost control, that the force was unreasonable, and that 5 wholly innocent people were killed. These are not allegations. These are findings of fact, established in court, under oath, on the evidence. Sadly, in our country, Representative Pat Harrigan of North Carolina and Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa have introduced a resolution into the Congress and House that would place America on the record of opposing the very accountability your families have sought for 50 years. It dismisses these judicial findings as politically motivated, and it is a direct insult to the courts that have delivered these verdicts and to the families who waited over 50 years for them. These cases are in court today solely because the United Kingdom spent decades denying, delaying, and waiting. The resolution effectively endorses the British Legacy Act of 2023, a law that was so flawed that all parties were against it. We, as an organization, are engaged in a call to action to contact members of the House and Senate to defeat this resolution, and we will have more to follow on that. It is ironic that King Charles himself, in his recent address to the United States Congress, invoked the Magna Carta, declaring that justice must be available to all and must not be denied or delayed. These words were cheered in the halls of Congress. They cannot be cheered there and denied here. To the families of Spring Hill and to all the brave families of the Troubles, the Ancient Order of Hibernians stands with you today, tomorrow, and always. Thank you for your courage. May God bless us all.